Welcome boys and girls, Christine here with a discussion about Total War Warhammer 40K, which seems so certain that it's going to be announced by the end of the year that we're starting to get some kind of information about what is going to be in the game, at least in terms of game modes. Chapter Master Valrak, who months ago stated that both 40K, Total War, and Dawn of War 4 were being developed, also made some interesting claims. Initially, he did state that there was going to be Space Marines, Chaos Space Marines, Eldar and Orcs, but now he has gone and stated that he heard from the friend of a friend that what 40K Total War is going to have is a Helldivers 2 mode. Now, Valrak himself was skeptical of this claim, but he did find it noteworthy enough to talk about. Here's my perspective, and the perspective of quite a few people when they heard about this leak, this speculation, this rumor, this claim. My perspective is this, as someone who's played Total War for a long time. If you look at Warhammer 3 right now, you have Realms of Chaos and Mortal Empires, you have multiplayer co-op, multiplayer PvP campaigns, then you have the special Cathayan map for multiplayer campaigns, then you have the special Kislev map, then you have survival battles, domination battles, and you also have regular battles. So my read on this is that it's not going to be the only mode that a Total War 40K game would have. Rather, it's going to be a mode inside the game. I think it would be very surprising for Creative Assembly to not focus on single player. But obviously, this brings up some very important points about how they are going to do Total War 40K. And we can look at the gaming landscape. We can look at things like Helldivers too, and that galactic campaign that maybe Creative Assembly would love to replicate because it has been very successful. If it was very successful for Sony, they might want to do the same. Sega, Creative Assembly, Games Workshop. They're all pieces in the puzzle and their desires. We also have to understand that Creative Assembly with Hyenas, they weren't just spending $100 million to just release a game that was going to fail or was only going to get them a certain amount of money. No, they were spend that much money because they believed that Hyenas could make them $1 billion. At least that's what certain sources have stated. Basically, they thought they could make either the next Apex Legend, the next Fortnite, you name it. That was their intent with Hyenas. It crashed and burned for many reasons. But what that really highlights to me is the fact that Creative Assembly has had this desire to release a game that went way above that, above their regular earnings, their regular profits. To be clear, Warhammer 3 is profitable. Warhammer 2 was profitable. But they want more. You look at things that they've tried over the years, Total War Arena, for instance, other things. You can bet that they are looking to do something like this, where they make a mode where they can milk it for all it's worth. Now, I'm not against this on a principle level, but there are obviously some caveats to be stated on the subject. One is how exactly they would focus on 40K. In an ideal world, and a real possibility I should add, is that, okay, they have a campaign mode, they have a big map for that mode, they have these races, they have a story mode, and so on and so forth. And the Helldivers 2 mode, or Galactic Conquest mode, is just part of what the game has to offer. A co-op experience, PvP experience, with you diving into battles across the planet with a kind of campaign similar to what Helldivers 2 does. Very successful model. They might just be aiming to replicate that. That's the more positive spin on it and the more positive way of viewing it. Sure, people would say, oh, they're not going to focus on single player, but we gotta understand, games do have budgets, resources, and developers, publishers, investors do have expectations. And in the ideal world, what we would get is like they would put more resources in general in Total War 40K for both story modes, campaign modes, and this Galactic Conquest mode. That is one way of viewing it, a possibility. The bad way of viewing it, the negative way of viewing it, is that if they do this, well, one, they could be ignoring the single-player aspect of the game, in which case there's a real possibility it could crash and burn if they screw it up. But a 40K Total War game is going to sell. Doesn't matter, right? It just has that answer. Total War 40K game, absolutely. Like, just, it's going to get sales, even if it's mediocre. At best, really. It could be worse than that. We could get another Realms of Chaos situation again, but I don't think we will. I think they've certainly learned some lessons. I don't think we're going to see a Realms of Chaos 2.0 or a Vortex Campaign 2.0 or another Pharaoh situation. But a more realistic way to view it from a negative standpoint, they could decide post-launch to focus all of their resources, or the vast majority of their resources, in not delivering single-player content in terms of new characters, new campaigns, new campaign mechanics, improvements of the campaign mechanics. Instead, focus those efforts on the Galactic Conquest mode. Let's go with that as a name, not just a Helldivers 2 mode, but like a Galactic Conquest mode, or Eternal War, or whatever name you want to go for. They could do so, and the concern here that I would have is they could decide, okay, we can spend money to develop single-player content, and we'd get a payoff, but we'd get a much bigger payoff for co-op and single-player content. You look at Space Marine 2, right? Good game, good graphics, runs well, solid campaign, but where has the effort of the developers gone into after that game came out? It wasn't single player. It wasn't even PvP. It was all the co-op mode of Space Marine 2. And I figured that the developers behind Space Marine 2, they probably knew this in advance, that their main focus was going to be that mode. They still had the story, they still had PvP, but the main focus, again, was that co-op mode. And that is quite possible what Creative Assembly might be doing over here. Make a co-op mode, recreate the kind of experience that people have had in Helldivers 2, multiple factions, likely, fighting for each other, control of territory, dynamic warfare. You have missions on a planet, you have orders, planet orders, galactic orders. You have that situation, you have 4 factions vying for power and influence. That could be a thing, right? Vying for power and influence. And I guess it would make sense if it's Chaos Space Marines, regular Space Marines, Eldar, and Orcs vying for power and influence across a galactic map. Fair enough. But then, of course, we run into the issue of what happened with Space Marine 2. If you look at Space Marine 2, they have a bunch of cosmetic DLC. And it is absolutely MTX, right? Microtransactions, all that. Though they're pretty expensive. If you think that the price increase with Forge of Chaos Dwarves and Shadows of Change was significant, you might be paying $7 for unit skins or lord skins. More than just one, a couple at the very least, but I could very well imagine a situation in which Creative Assembly goes down that development path. They release some content that's paid, and that funds them doing free updates, which is already their model, for the record. DLCs pay for the free updates we get, the racial reworks, various improvements. They're already doing this. Just change how it works, make a lot of money, see the dollar sign in your eyes. Now, you can call me optimistic, you can call me pessimistic. I'm just laying down the possibilities. It could go well. It could be a situation where it might be a secondary mode and the campaign the single player aspect takes the front seat. It could be a case of where there's a balance between these modes. It could be a case where they focus on the co-op mode above all others and we get a lack of single player content. Final note is that Valrak also mentioned that, the next historical Total War game is medieval free. Not surprising, he's not the first, he isn't the last that has stated that specific sentiment. I think it makes sense if it is medieval free. There are obviously other possibilities, but yeah, if they're going to go a historical game, medieval free is a fairly safe bet. That's all I had to say. Costine signing out. Let me know what you guys think. How do you think this is going to be unfold? Of course, there's always the underlying assumption. What if it's just made up? Based on the current market conditions, the history of Creative Assembly as the developer, the things they've done, the things they've tried to do, with leaks, you always got to understand, yes, it could just very well be made up stuff. But there's also the situation with leaks that there's a reason why these leaks happen. It's not just someone, oh, I got lucky enough to play a beta test and then I'm just telling someone that's a buddy about this. That does happen. But there's also many situations in which companies, developers, even governments, they won't state something officially, but they will state it unofficially to determine how people are reacting, potentially change plans. So let me know what you guys think about all of this. That's the nature of leaks. Also, final point, should always be mentioned on this subject, leaks are, by their very nature, not necessarily accurate, except potentially, and emphasis on the potential aspect, in the moment. Things do change. Plans do change. If you look at a history of Creative Assembly, you look at the last 2 years or the last year of Creative Assembly, you see that things have changed substantially, especially since the release of Shadows Change. Things do change. There might have been a plan at one point, but then that plan shifts and changes, priorities take place. The biggest example of this I can give is the Dogs of War situation. We had Dogs of War mentioned in the game files, and apparently now they're not going to come out. Like a lot of people expected, and quite a few leaks mentioned that Dogs of War would come out, but now the latest round says that they're not likely to do that. Remains to be seen what is accurate on that, but just making this point, things are always subject to change, especially with unofficial information. That's the reason it's unofficial. Costine, signing out.